What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikaPikaPaPa, and here we are with another Technicolor Dream Coat of Pokemon data that we are going to be digging into. And I thought this would be a really cool time to look at Sword and Shield alt arts. Now, to kind of walk you through the story of how we got to this point, we started back in March of this year, okay? And what we did back in March was we said, we just knew. Everybody knew. It wasn't something that we magically discovered here on this channel. We all felt like all these Sword and Shield booster boxes are going to sell out soon. Everybody knew alt arts were the big chase cards, and we said, hey, listen, this would be a great time to baseline us. Let's understand what the current market is for some of these awesome chase cards in the Sword and Shield era. So that's what we did. We pulled the top 20 chase cards from the Sword and Shield era. We pulled their PSA numbers, like how many PSA 10s actually existed, and then in that column to the right of the PSA 10, you'll see PSA 10%. We pulled the gem rate to understand, okay, out of however many cards that were sent to PSA, how many of them ended up in a PSA 10 holder. So for example, if the PSA 10 gem rate is 70% and 100 cards were sent to PSA, then 70 of them ended up in a PSA 10 gem mint holder. And then, of course, we also baselined the price. So we started off with all of this information. We started off with, okay, March of 2024, these are the cards, this is the PSA 10 population, and this is the price of those cards. Then in June, we decided to come back and look at it again, right? Prices were going crazy. We thought this would be an awesome opportunity for us to get an understanding of what cards had performed well, what cards had not performed well, what lessons can we take from that, and that was how we ended up with this block right here in the blue all the way down. And I promise I'm going to break this up in the future, so don't let all of these colors kind of jobble your mind a little bit. We're gonna break this down into more digestible format, I promise. But in June, we looked at this, and we looked at a couple things. You'll see the growth column right there. We looked at how much growth did the PSA 10 population have, right? When prices started to spike, did everybody pull them out of their binders, send them to PSA? Did we see huge spikes in overall population growth? And then, of course, we looked at the new price, like what cards went up the most in price? Where did we see this? What kind of correlations could we make? And we did a ton of work on that. However, now in August, we're starting to see a downturn, right? I think that's kind of an understatement. We're starting to see a lot of these cards that spiked off a couple months ago come back down to reality. So here I have all of these columns here. Again, I reset the point. We have new PSA 10 populations. We have what I call the new price. So not the new price from June, the new price in August. And then we baseline the growth versus both. So what did it grow from June till now? And what did it grow from March till now? And we're going to look at that in a whole lot of other detail here in the future. But I thought what was really cool is if you look down here, here's what you see at the very bottom. You see the yellow arrow that I just kind of popped up on the screen. You see that when you look from June until now, they're down 13% on average. So these Sword and Shield alt arts, these chase cards, like these are down 13% on average over the last 2 months. However, if you look to the right of that versus March, they're still up 31%. I think here in the Pokemon collecting and investing space, and like a lot of places, like we become very fixated on what's going on right now. Like everybody's talking about these alt arts, everything's crashing, prices are coming down. Well, for me, this is just a correction. And if you look from where our real jumping off point back in March, like these cards are still up a significant percent. So yeah, of course, if you were a part of the FOMO and you bought during the highs when everything was spiking, like, yeah, it's going to hurt. But if you had bought back when we understood that these were the awesome cards, that when we really thought these were going to grow in price, you're still doing fine. You're still up 31% over the last 5 to 6 months. I mean, that's a rate of return that you won't find anywhere else. So like I said, we're going to slice and dice this. We're going to break it down in a ton of detail. But before I get into that, as I always have to say, we do a ton of work, a ton of data dives, a ton of data storage in the background here at the PikaPikaPaPa channel. So if you enjoy this content, if you find value in it, we would love it if you hit the subscribe button, become a member of this community. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up, and questions or comments, drop them down below. Those 3 small things go a long way in helping my small channel out. Lets me know you appreciate the work that I put into this. So with that being said, let's start looking at this a little bit. Now, this is the exact final slide from the video that we did 2 months ago. Remember, we started in March, and then in June we did a look back, and this is the final slide from that, because this is where we identified the cards. I think this is the 6 cards that had grown the most over that period of time, and we talked about some of the things that we saw. one of the most interesting things was the price. The jumping off price from March was relatively low compared to a lot of them. Now, you have some really cool cards on here. I mean, we had the Giratina from Crown Zenith. You got the Machamp from Astral Radiance. You got Leafeon from Evolving Skies. You got the Blaziken from Chilling Reign, right? Like, I mean, these are some really awesome cards on there. But if you look, almost not only 4 of the 6 had a jumping off point in a PSA 10 grade of under $200. Now, obviously, Evolving Skies is what it is, and that Chilling Reign Blaziken was already up at $300. But even with that, if you look at the price growth, these things grew exponentially over those 3-month periods. Now, the other thing that was really cool is look at the PSA 10 population. That's the column to the right of that purple square that I put on there to help everybody identify what we're talking about. And for the most part, these PSA 10s, some of them are high, but they're not extraordinarily high compared to their peers, right? You've got the Giratina from Crown Zenith at 6,000. That's on the higher side of things. You got the Mewtwo also from Crown Zenith. Again, that's on the higher side of things. But when you get outside of that, you start getting into the Astral Radiance Machamp at 2,500. You get to the Tyranitar, the Sleepy T-Tar here at 3,200, right? Then you get to the Blaziken from Chilling Reign. That was only at 3,000. So comparatively lower jumping off point and comparatively lower PSA 10 population. So then we got into this right here. Then I thought what we really have to do is we have to look at June of 2024 until August. So how have things performed over the last couple months to give us an understanding of what we're talking about? What's the market doing now? So I pulled this right here. These are the PSA 10 populations and the actual new price from June of 2024. And then of course in the right-hand column, you have the prices that are now. And I also call out the growth. So how much did the PSA 10 population grow over that period of time? And then of course the change in price. So you understand where we're jumping off from June of 2024. So I'm gonna go ahead and black that out. That way you understand what we're talking about. So we are specifically looking at PSA 10 population growth over the last couple months and the price change over the last couple months. So if you look on the far right-hand corner, literally everything except the Shining Fates Charizard is down, okay? And that Charizard is essentially flat. So outside of the Shining Fates Charizard, which has a population of over 20,000, outside of that, everything is down over the last couple months. Now, a couple things to take away here. If you look down at the very bottom, obviously, those are the ones with the biggest loss. So you see the Aerodactyl, the Giratina from Crown Zenith, which actually was one of our biggest gainers. If you remember from the last time we did this video, you got the Pikachu from Vivid Voltage. You have all of that going on. And then when you look at the PSA 10 population growth, you'll see that the most that we have seen the population grow over the last couple months has been 9%. And unsurprisingly, those are from the newer sets in the Sword and Shield block. You see 9% from the Arceus in Crown Zenith, right? You see 9% from Lugia in Silver Tempest, right? Silver Tempest is still in stock at the Pokemon Center last I checked. You got the Giratina from Crown Zenith on there, and even the Giratina from Lost Origin. Again, remember, Lost Origin in the grand scheme of things was one of the final Sword and Shield sets, so it's not, you know, it's kind of in the back third, let's say that much. So Giratina is still up there with plus 8%, and then when you look at it, again, we have lots of price depreciation. So from there, what I really wanted to look at was this. I thought the most important thing, because we are going to have cycles like this throughout the course of Pokemon collecting and investing history. We're going to have markets that are hot, we're going to have markets that are down. But what I thought was really cool with all of this information is be able to see, now that we've seen a jumping off point, now that we've seen just a crazy spike, now that we've seen them start to come back down, which cards from March of 2024 until August of 2024 have performed the best. Again, we've gone through a baseline cycle, we've gone through a cycle of price appreciation, we're going through a cycle of price depreciation right now. So this is what I really wanted to look at, and I thought that this would be one of the biggest takeaways. And again, I will continue to update this every couple months as we go forward, because we'll just continue to learn, we'll continue to get better, and we'll continue to get more information. More information, more data points is always the answer. So one of the things that I took away here is obviously the growth numbers are, you know, muted versus what they were before, but you still see some really robust growth. I mean, my gosh, we still have 4 cards here that are up over 50% over the last 5 to 6 months, which is just incredible. That is nothing to shake a fist at. So then I really wanted to slice and dice this, okay? What am I going to learn from this? So the first thing that I learned was those cards right there at the very bottom. I drew a red line through cards that are not Sword and Shield alt arts, right? So you have cards on this list like the Pikachu, the Chunkachu, the Rainbow Secret Rare from Vivid Voltage, right? You got the Charizard from Shining Fates. You got the Charizard V-Star from Brilliant Stars, right? You got the Charizard from Celebrations. You have cards on this list that, yes, they were chase cards back in March in terms of value, but they were not chase cards in terms of the variant of card that they were. So when I look at where the lower amount of gains have come from, or even in this case, some losses, you know, they are non-alt art cards. Not a surprise, but for me, as I'm thinking about Scarlet and Violet, where I'm going to make my moves, where I'm going to invest my money, like I want to figure out what the alt art equivalent is going to be in Scarlet and Violet. Is it going to be illustration rares? Is it going to be special illustration rares? Is it going to be some cool variant we don't even know yet? I mean, there's rumors of tag team cards coming out. There's rumors of mega evolutions. Like, what if you have illustration rares of tag team cards, right? Like, that is what I want to look for in the future, in the next couple sets that are coming out from Scarlet and Violet, because obviously we all understand, you know, alt art started with battle styles and then they just continue to get better and better as Sword and Shield went on. So that's what I'm going to look for. The other thing that I identified that I thought was really cool was I looked at these 3 cards individually. So I've got the Lugia from Silver Tempest, I got the Giratina from Lost Origin, and I got the Charizard from Brilliant Stars, okay? So where that yellow column where I have highlighted right there, you'll see the PSA 10 population for the Lugia and for the Charizard are through the roof. They are already over 9,000 from an overall PSA 10 population. That is a crazy high number. So that was my takeaway from those, because when I think about it, the Lugia from Silver Tempest, that's a stunner of a card, right? That's a big chase card from a pretty awesome Sword and Shield era set. And to see it in the bottom half of growth, now I think there's something to say about it being the newest set. It's well past the Pokemon Pop and Flop, but I do think that's a factor as well. And then Charizard and Brilliant Stars, right? Charizard's Charizard, right? Like, this is the big alt art chase card from Brilliant Stars, and a lot of people love Brilliant Stars. I think it's a really deep set. I think it has a lot of great cards in it, but again, a population of 9,000, and when you see other cards on this list that are up 40, 45, 50, 60% over the last 5 months, and then the Charizard from Brilliant Stars is only up 8%, those were 2 of the things that jumped out at me. The other thing I thought was interesting is the Giratina, in my mind, is on a whole different level. Like, for me, you got the Gengar, you got the Giratina, you got the, you know, the Moonbreon, obviously, you got the Rayquaza from Evolving Skies. Like, those are kind of like the upper echelon of the Sword and Shield era alt arts, yet the Giratina saw some of the lower gains comparative to its counterparts. Now, what you do see there is in that growth column, the overall PSA 10 population for that Giratina is up 39% over the last 5 months. So out of all of these awesome cards that we've looked at, the market has had more of these Giratina PSA 10s come into it than any of the other cards. So that goes to tell me another thing, right? Like, hey, listen, as we start to see more of these cards flood into the market, the price is going to be depressed a little bit, right? We always talk about supply and demand, and as the supply increases, if the supply increases at a faster rate than the demand, that's going to depress prices a little bit. So as we start to see the Giratinas kind of tail off in terms of new PSA 10s coming into the market, is this a card that has the opportunity to have some serious future gains ahead of it? It's yet to be seen, but it is something that I'm going to keep in the back of my mind, and it's why I do these videos, and it's why I make sure that we talk about this at regular intervals. So the Giratina from Lost Origin is something I definitely want to keep an eye on. Now, the next thing I thought too was, okay, I talked about those high PSA 10 populations, so I wanted to isolate all of the cards on the list that have a higher than 8,000 PSA 10 population. So that's what we did here. Again, this is all about data diving, this is about learning, this is about trying to level us up. So I did this. These are all the cards that right now have a PSA 10 population over 8,000, and you see 2 cards on here with really, really strong growth. You see the Rayquaza and you see the Moonbreon on here. Now, I want to take those cards and kind of put them in a bucket, because I will say this, I think that the Evolving Skies is just different, right? Booster boxes are a little below $700, but they're right in the $700 range right now. The Moonbreon is obviously the biggest chase card of the Sword and Shield era. So because the set is so hyped, because it is the set of the Sword and Shield era, and these are the chase cards, the market will support a much higher population. Now, seeing that Moonbreon at a population approaching 12,500, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see as that continues to grow. Is it going to be a plus 15,000 pop card? I mean, who knows? I don't think a lot of Evolving Skies is going to be ripped, so I don't think we're going to see tons of these, you know, kind of flooding the market anytime soon, but it is interesting to see, you know, where the top is, where it'll start leveling off. We'll always have a couple coming in every single month, but where are we going to start to really see this level off and to see how the market, you know, kind of responds to that? Same thing with the Rayquaza, right? You got an 8,000 PSA pop there. But what was really interesting to me was when I looked at the other cards on the list. Again, we talked about the Lugia here, right? There's over 9,374. That's going to be an 11, 12,000 PSA 10 pop card. How is the market going to support that far into the future? Same thing with that Brilliant Stars Charizard that we talked about, right? And then when you look at some of these other cards, and I'm not saying that you can compare them because Shining Fates and Celebrations was a totally different collecting time, right? Like this was on the tail end of the pandemic. You know, Shining Fates, my gosh, that thing sold out and was being scalped left and right, and the Pokemon company said, forget you scalpers, we're going to print this absolutely into oblivion, and they did. You can still find it below MSRP. Crazy to think about that, but that is why those cards haven't been able to really gain a lot of steam. I mean, visually, they're really cool. They're awesome cards. However, the PSA 10 population of that Shining Fates Charizard in 10 is over 20,000, and the Celebrations Charizard is knocking on the door as well. So population obviously matters. Again, the whole hobby is all about supply and demand. Now, the next thing that I wanted to do, and this is the final one I promise, was again, highlight the top 6 gainers from March of 2024 all the way till August. Again, not to beat the dead horse, but we've been through the different cycles. We've baselined, we've been through a period of price appreciation, and now we're in the middle of the price decline. So it was interesting to me to see which cards have been able to hold on to their value the most, and guess what? 4 of the 6 are the same. Now, we do have 2 cards that have cycled out. We saw the Mewtwo from Crown Zenith, one of my favorite cards of all time, come off the list, and we saw the Blaziken came off. However, the Arceus from Crown Zenith replaced the Mewtwo, and the Gengar from Fusion Strike is back on here. Now, I will say this, we have 2 cards from Crown Zenith on here, and Crown Zenith is still flooding into the market, so I do have some honest concerns about how that set and how these graded cards are going to age long run. I mean, look at Crown Zenith Giratina. The population right now is at 6,662. The Crown Zenith Arceus is at 5,533. My God, we have a Sam's exclusive Crown Zenith product that's going to be coming out here relatively soon. So, I mean, where is the top? Where are these going to end? But even with that being said, when you compare the jumping off points, right? Again, look at the jumping off points for these prices: $156, $136, $186, $238, $111, compared to all of the other alt arts, relatively low PSA 10 jumping off points. And then when you look at the PSA population, remember, we were looking at cards with 6, 7, 8, 9, heck, 20,000 in PSA 10s. You look at these, the Machamp from Astral Radiance still has only 2,600 in PSA 10. The Giratina from Crown Zenith has 6,600. Like I said, that one's starting to get up there. The Gengar from Fusion Strike is at 6,600. That's starting to get up there. But the Tyranitar from Battle Styles at 3,400. The Leafeon from Evolving Skies at 5,800. And the Arceus from Crown Zenith at 5,500 in PSA 10s. It is going to be fascinating to watch how these lists move over time. But again, we've done this exercise twice. We did it during the peak. Now we're doing it during the downfall. I'm going to wait another 2 to 3 months and we will do a view of this again, because once we understand how these big chase cards towards the end of the Sword and Shield era performed, we're going to be really well armed with as much information as we possibly can be. As we start to get to the tail end of the Scarlet and Violet era, we're going to be in a great position to make what I hope to be some really smart moves. So, if you made it to the end of this data-packed video and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, you obviously like this content, so what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. If you have a question or comment, drop them down below. And again, if you enjoyed this, give me a big old thumbs up. I appreciate you more than I can say. I hope you have an epic one, and I'll talk to you soon, everybody. Thanks. Bye.